a passerby discovered the body of 33-year-old Joni Marie Grigsby. She had been sexually assaulted and strangled.
It is a warm summer night in early June, 1995. Springfield, Oregon. The Willamette River moves slow and dark beneath the Main Street Bridge. The kind of night where the air stays thick, even after the sun goes down, and where you can hear the water before you see it. A woman walks into the tall grass near the water. She's been here before. She knows this place. But tonight, something is different. She doesn't come back out. Her name was Joni Marie Grigsby, born May 5, 1962, in Long Beach, California. By the time she was 33 years old, she'd spent more than 2 decades in Oregon, making a life for herself and her 2 young sons in the Springfield area. Her younger brother, Jon Roberts, described her simply as,
"She was fun-loving, happy-go-lucky person. She was the person you wanted to be around, a beautiful spirit. She took care of me when I was little. You know, we had a special bond."
But that warmth would be stolen. June 2, 1995. A little after 9 p.m., the sun had just set over the Willamette Valley. The light was fading fast. A pedestrian was walking near the Willamette River, on the Glenwood side of the Main Street Bridge. The grass was tall there, thick enough to hide things you don't want to find. The pedestrian saw something lying in the undergrowth, something that didn't belong in the grass. A woman's body. Joni Grigsby. She was face down. She had been sexually assaulted and strangled to death. The medical examiner would later note severe traumatic injuries to her face and body. But right there, in the dirt under the bridge, investigators made a decision that would prove crucial decades later. They kept the details secret. They withheld the specifics of her injuries, the exact nature of the trauma, and the confidential forensic findings. They did it to protect the case, to ensure that if anyone ever confessed, or if a tip ever came in, they would know it was real. And that secret would protect the truth for over 30 years. The Lane County Sheriff's Office threw everything they had at this case. Kurt West was a detective on duty that night. He would later say,
"When I first got involved in it, the night that we found her, that was one of the longest times I ever stayed up. I think I stayed up about 40 hours on that particular day."
As detectives tried to trace her final steps, they had to confront more complicated realities of Joni's life. She had lost her mother to cancer when her 2 sons, Jonathan and David, were still very young. To cope with the pain, Joni turned to the local party lifestyle. She struggled with addiction. She had run-ins with the law. Her oldest son, John Shores, who was just 13 years old when his mother died, recalled those years with painful honesty. "She would go out and party, and wasn't really there to watch over us like she should have been. We were both young and didn't have very much time with her." With her background, police decided to interview her boyfriend. He acted highly suspicious, but they couldn't tie him to the physical crime. They gathered DNA evidence from the scene and began swabbing men in the area. In total, they swabbed 40 local men who frequented the riverbanks. Every single one came back negative. They investigated the possibility that more than one person was involved. But with no eyewitnesses, no suspects, and no leads, the case, like so many cases in that era, was moved to a shelf, classified as cold. And somewhere out there, the man who murdered Joni Grigsby went home. For the next 31 years, Joni's family lived with a void that never fully closed. Her younger brother, Jon Roberts, was destroyed by her death. He later admitted, "For 31 years, I carried the weight of great grief, absence of closure, and so many unanswered questions about my sister's homicide. For me, this was all I knew. I was a drug addict for a long time because of it." Today, Jon Roberts is 19 years sober, but that wait, that 31-year wait, never truly left him. Meanwhile, Joni's oldest son, Jon Shores, grew up in Missouri, protected by relatives who shielded him from the brutal details of his mother's death. In his early 20s, driven by a desperate need for answers, Jon Shores tried to conduct his own investigation. He reached out to Springfield locals, called the sheriff's office, tried to piece together her final days. But digging into his mother's painful past became too overwhelming. The emotional cost was too high. He had to stop. While the family struggled with this chronic, unresolved grief, something was quietly taking shape in Lane County. There is a cold case team in Lane County, made up entirely of retired law enforcement officers. They donate their time. They're funded entirely by public donations, receiving absolutely zero taxpayer funding. Kurt West, the same detective who had stayed up 40 hours the night Joni's body was found, was one of them. He retired in 2002, but he refused to let Joni be forgotten. He joined the cold case unit specifically to keep working cases like this one. 28 years after Joni Grigsby was murdered, the cold case team made a decision. They sent the preserved DNA evidence from 1995, evidence that had been sitting in storage for nearly 3 decades, to a private laboratory for advanced testing. What came back changed everything. The scientists used a technique called investigative genetic genealogy and were able to narrow down the suspect pool to a small handful of people. By mapping family trees, finding distant relatives who had uploaded their DNA to public genealogy databases, tracing lines backward to common ancestors, then forward again, narrowing by sex, by age, by geography. One name kept coming up. Every branch, every line, every trace, same name. Roy Curtis Gomes. Born September 3, 1966, in Sacramento, California. He was 28 years old in the summer of 1995. He had no known family ties to Oregon. He had no documented employment in Springfield. No connection to Joni Grigsby that investigators have ever been able to establish. He was a complete stranger, someone who crossed her path under that bridge, committed an act of brutal violence, and simply walked back to his daily life. Every case on this channel takes weeks of digging through real records, and it's viewers like you who make sure these cases aren't forgotten. If you want to help keep this running, hit like and subscribe. When detectives began searching for Roy Gomes, he wasn't in prison. He wasn't hiding. He was dead. On March 5, 2004, 9 years after Joni Grigsby was murdered, Roy Gomes's life had ended in a violent confrontation with police in Sacramento, California. He was 37 years old and on active parole. It was 5:28 p.m. on a Friday afternoon. West Sacramento police officer George Hunter spotted Gomes walking along the railroad tracks near the Sacramento River, right by the I Street Bridge. Gomes was carrying a backpack and holding a beer bottle. Officer Hunter approached him for drinking in public, but Gomes snapped. He turned to the officer and said, "I'm not gonna go with you." When the officer tried to speak with him, Gomes began screaming, "Fuck you. You guys killed my family. I'm not gonna go with you." Gomes threw his backpack and started running. As Officer Hunter pursued him, Gomes picked up heavy rocks and glass bottles from the ground and threw them violently at the officer. Officer Hunter had to use his hands to deflect the flying glass and stone. And then, Gomes pulled out a metal-like object, later identified as a knife. He made a sudden, aggressive move to throw it directly at the officers. Fearing for his life, an officer fired. Roy Gomes was shot in the chest. He died at the scene. The man who screamed that someone had killed his family had spent 9 years a free man after killing someone else's. Following the shootout, the Sacramento County Coroner's Office performed a routine autopsy. And during that autopsy, they did the single most consequential thing in this entire 31-year case. They collected and preserved his DNA. Gomes's DNA profile sat in California's archives for 22 years. Sacramento authorities had no idea he was connected to a cold case in Oregon. There was no reason to think he was connected to anything at all. But in late 2023, when the Lane County cold case team traced the genealogy to Gomes, they found his 2004 death record. They requested his preserved DNA sample from California for testing. They submitted it directly against the 1995 Springfield crime scene DNA evidence. And when the results came back, it was a perfect match. The man who murdered Joni Marie Grigsby had been dead for over 20 years. On March 12, 2026, detectives privately notified Joni's brother, Jon Roberts, that they had a name. 3 months later, June 11, 2026, the Lane County Sheriff's Office officially made the announcement public and closed the case. Jon Roberts described the moment as a shockwave.
There was a little shock, 31 years is a long time. There's always just been questions like, where'd this guy come from and how did he end up here? He had no known contacts here that detectives could uncover, and no ties to my sister. So it appears to be some random act of violence.
And then there was Joni's oldest son, Jon Shores, 44 years old now, living in Missouri. The Lane County Sheriff's Office never directly contacted him. He found out his mother's killer had been identified when a local journalist called him asking for a comment. Part of it is a chills down my spine feeling, that she's been in a better place for a long time. She's not hurting anymore. I have seen the name before. I don't remember any specifics about the guy, but another part of me wonders if that's the whole thing, or if others possibly were involved. He got his answer in the worst possible way. And even now, he's not sure it's the whole answer. Roy Curtis Gomes never spent a single day in prison for what he did to Joni Grigsby. He lived a free life for 9 years, only to die in a different state, for a completely different reason. There would be no trial, no handcuffs, no opportunity for a hurting family to look the killer in the eyes and demand to know why. For Joni's family, justice did not arrive as punishment. It came in the form of answers. Jon Roberts spent 31 years carrying his sister's memory through addiction, through grief, through 19 years of hard-won sobriety. Jon Shores grew up without his mother, tried once to find answers, couldn't survive the search, and just hoped. And a team of retired detectives who refused to let her file go completely cold. Joni Marie Grigsby was born May 5, 1962. She was murdered June 2, 1995. She was 33 years old. She was a waitress. She was a mother. She was a sister. She was the person you wanted to be around. A beautiful spirit. That's who she was. That's who she'll always be. If Joni's story stayed with you, please leave a comment below. It helps ensure cases like hers are never forgotten. Hit like and subscribe to True Crime Lore, and we'll see you in the next one.